High Marshal Zyler reclined in his command chair, a self-satisfied smirk stretching across his reptilian features. Before him, the holographic display flickered with the latest battle reports. Another skirmish, another victory. The humans had put up some resistance, of course, but it was like watching a child throw pebbles at a warship. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Veldrak, who was meticulously polishing his crimson battle insignia. "Tell me, Veldrak, do you ever feel guilty for this? I mean, it's almost unsporting." Veldrak snorted, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "Guilt, High Marshal? I feel something, but it's closer to boredom. These humans, they are amusing, in their own primitive way." Zyler chuckled, sipping a goblet of deep blue Reckitt wine. "Indeed, they fight with such spirit, such desperation. It's almost admirable, like a wounded rodent baring its teeth before the end." He gestured lazily at the hologram. "Look at their tactics. Ambushes. Hit-and-run strikes. They behave as if our warships are unaware of their little tricks." Veldrak tapped the screen, zooming in on a small group of human resistance fighters retreating into the ruins of one of their shattered cities. "It is the same every time. They fire, they run, they hide. As if we won't simply track them down. As if we won't reduce every building to rubble until there is nowhere left to hide. And yet," Zyler mused, swirling his drink, "they persist. Fascinating little creatures. I suppose one must admire their stubbornness, even if it is completely futile." He leaned forward, a glimmer of amusement in his golden eyes. "And what is this I hear about a sniper? Our troops are whispering, Veldrak. A ghost in the ruins? An invisible killer?" Veldrak scoffed. "A myth, High Marshal. Some nameless human with an outdated rifle. Our patrols have suffered minor losses. Statistical anomalies, nothing more." Zyler nodded, though a smirk played at his lips. "Oh, of course, an anomaly. And yet, we've lost 3 officers in the last week, all with a single precise shot. Rather embarrassing, wouldn't you say?" Veldrak hesitated for a fraction of a second, then recovered. "It is being handled." Zyler set his goblet down and rose from his chair, strolling toward the towering observation window. Below, the vast, conquered landscape of Earth stretched out in all directions. Fires smoldered in the distance, and massive Imperial walkers stalked through the skeletal remains of human buildings. He sighed theatrically. I had expected more from them. Stories of their resilience, their adaptability. Where is it? Where is this human ingenuity they pride themselves on? Instead, they skulk in shadows, picking at our heels like vermin. Before Veldrak could answer, the room's comms panel crackled to life. "High Marshal," came a voice, breathless and urgent. We have another incident." Zyler turned, his brow ridges lifting. "Another?" There was a pause. "Captain Rivas, sir. A single shot." He didn't even have time to react. Zyler sighed, rubbing his temple. "A single shot. Always one shot. How terribly inefficient." He turned to Veldrak, his voice light with amusement. "You see? This is what I mean about their lack of innovation. They won't even waste a second bullet." Veldrak, despite his earlier confidence, shifted uneasily. "Shall I deploy more scanners, sir? More patrols?" Zyler considered this, then shook his head. No. Let them have their little victories. A few dead officers? It's an annoyance at best. The humans are clinging to hope, and hope is such a fragile thing. They will see, soon enough, that it is not enough." Veldrak hesitated. "And if this sniper continues?" Zyler laughed, sharp and grating. "Then let them keep playing their little game. It will not change the outcome." He gestured grandly to the burning world below. "This planet belongs to the Empire. Let them scurry in the ruins like insects. In the end, all their cunning, all their defiance will amount to nothing." Far below, hidden among the rubble and shadows, a lone human adjusted his scope, steadying his breath. "A single shot, always one shot." The High Marshal laughed, unaware that his turn was coming. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying the scent of charred metal and dust. Captain Jack Rivers lay motionless, his body blending into the rubble like a ghost that had decided to settle down for a nap. His rifle, A battered but deadly coil gun rested snugly against his shoulder, its scope reflecting the distant glimmer of the Empire's command post. He exhaled slowly. Not too fast, not too slow. Breathe in, breathe out. A steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a countdown. Through the scope, he spotted them, 3 alien officers standing near an armored transport, engaged in what looked like an incredibly self-important conversation. The one in the middle, a broad-shouldered brute with a gaudy red sash, was gesturing wildly, probably ranting about something he didn't understand. Jack had grown quite fond of watching the officers bark orders while their soldiers stood stiffly, pretending to listen. Galactic arrogance in its purest form. His finger hovered over the trigger. He had time. He had patience. What he didn't have was a sense of sympathy. The Empire had rolled in like they owned the place, which, okay, technically they did now, but Jack had never been one for bureaucracy. They called humanity weak, uncivilized, a race of primitive scavengers who didn't understand real warfare. He found that particularly amusing, given how often he'd seen them scramble like headless chickens whenever a single one of their officers dropped dead. Jack adjusted his aim slightly. The one in the red sash, definitely an officer of some kind, was his mark. High-ranking, well-fed, oblivious. Probably thought he was untouchable. Probably had a name that sounded like someone sneezing into a microphone. Jack exhaled. The shot cracked through the silence, an invisible death sentence. A fraction of a second later, red sash jerked violently and crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut. The 2 remaining officers flinched, their heads snapping toward their fallen comrade before panic set in. They started shouting, pointing in opposite directions, which Jack found incredibly generous of them. It meant he didn't even have to guess which way they'd run. He took out the second one before the fool could finish whatever urgent command he'd been trying to shout. The third, in a stunning display of survival instincts, took off in a dead sprint toward cover. Jack watched him through the scope, debating whether to take the shot. Then he sighed and let the poor guy go. Let him tell the story. Let them whisper about the ghost in the ruins. Jack rolled onto his back, staring up at the pale, smoke-stained sky. His stomach growled, a rude reminder that being a legend didn't come with a decent meal plan. He pulled a ration bar from his pack, tore it open, and took a bite, grimacing at the cardboard texture. Humanity might be good at war, but they were absolute garbage at making anything taste like food. A voice crackled through his earpiece. Rivers, tell me that was you and not some other rogue sniper stealing your thunder. Jack smirked, chewing slowly before responding. If it wasn't me, then I'm suing someone for copyright infringement. A dry chuckle. Nice shot. Empire's getting twitchy. You've got them spooked. Jack wiped some dust off his rifle. Good. Twitchy enemies make mistakes. The voice on the other end, Sergeant Leanne Carter sighed. Yeah, well, keep in mind that twitchy enemies also send bigger guns when they get nervous. Jack grinned. Oh, I'm counting on it. He could already see the ripple effect beginning. They'd send scouts, drones, maybe even a special forces unit. If he was lucky, they would pour resources into flushing out one man because they couldn't afford the humiliation of admitting that he was a problem they couldn't solve. And that was the trick, wasn't it? The Empire didn't just fight wars with weapons. They fought with dominance, with intimidation. They won because their enemies believed they couldn't be beaten. Jack wasn't interested in playing along. As he packed up his rifle, movement in the distance caught his eye. A squad of alien soldiers, cautiously making their way through the ruins, sweeping the area with handheld scanners. Their body language screamed nervous energy. He almost felt bad for them. Almost. Jack slid back into the shadows, his presence dissolving into the wreckage. They wouldn't see him, wouldn't hear him, but soon enough, they'd feel him. The Empire was angry. Jack could tell by the way the patrols moved. Tighter formations, sharper movements, weapons drawn and twitching at the slightest sound. The officers barked orders with a frantic edge, their confidence fraying at the seams. More scanners, more drones, more desperate attempts to control something they didn't understand. It was almost flattering. Almost. Jack lay belly down on a crumbling rooftop, chewing the last bite of his ration bar, watching a fresh squad of soldiers pick their way through the ruins below. 10 of them this time. Bigger guns, better armor. The Empire was done pretending he was a minor inconvenience. Well, he murmured, adjusting his scope. They finally sent the good china. The squad moved in textbook precision, sweeping through the debris like they expected him to pop out at any second. Which, to be fair, wasn't an entirely unreasonable concern. A few of them had thermal scanners, sweeping the rubble with mechanical efficiency. Jack smirked. Cute. Thermals worked great against enemies who didn't know how to hide their heat signatures. Fortunately for Jack, he had spent years perfecting the art of not being seen, wrapping himself in insulation, timing his shots, and never staying in one place for too long. He picked his target carefully. The squad leader, standing near the middle, visor flashing with constant updates from command. He was stockier than the others, his armor reinforced, brimming with tech. The kind of guy who probably made his soldiers call him Serb even when they were off duty. Jack exhaled. The rifle kicked against his shoulder. The squad leader's head snapped back, and then he was gone, crumpled in a heap before anyone had registered what had happened. For half a second, there was absolute stillness. Then chaos. Shouts erupted. Soldiers dove for cover, scrambling behind shattered walls and twisted metal. One of them, in a fit of genius, fired wildly into the distance, hitting absolutely nothing but a very unlucky pile of rubble. Jack chuckled, already moving. He slid backward, rolling off the roof and landing lightly on the ground below. Staying put was how you got dead real quick. Snipers who got cocky didn't get old. Through his earpiece, Lien's voice crackled in. I assumed that was you? Jack adjusted his pack, jogging low through the ruins. Nope. Just a very aggressive gust of wind. Lien snorted. Empire's losing it. They just put out a kill order on you. High priority. Jack whistled. Ah, they think I'm special. They also just deployed the Shadow Hunters. Jack's smirk faded. That was less amusing. The Krillian Shadow Hunters weren't standard grunts. They were the Empire's top-tier killers, stealth operatives who specialized in hunting problem cases like Jack. They moved like phantoms, struck like vipers, and had a nasty habit of making people disappear without a sound. Okay, Jack muttered, ducking into an alley. That complicates things. He paused near the remains of an old skyscraper, scanning the area. He couldn't see them yet, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Shadow Hunters didn't announce their presence. They didn't stomp around like regular troops. They melted into the battlefield, waited for you to make a mistake, and then, well, that was usually the last thing anyone knew. Jack exhaled slowly. This wasn't a fight he could win by picking them off one by one. He needed to change the game. He pulled a small device from his pack. A homemade pulse jammer, crudely modified but effective. A single switch, and every scanner, drone, and visor in a 100-meter radius would go blind for exactly 15 seconds. 15 seconds wasn't a lot, but for a sniper, it was an eternity. He crouched behind cover, waiting, listening. The ruins were too quiet. They were here. Jack flipped the switch. A ripple of static crackled through the air as the jammer activated. The distant hum of drones cut out. The faint glow of visors flickered and died. Then, for the first time, Jack heard them. Soft footsteps, barely there, shifting through the debris. The hunters, momentarily disoriented, adjusting to sudden blindness. Jack moved fast. He swung around cover, fired once, one down. Shifted position, fired again, two down. A third lunged toward him, nearly too fast to track. He ducked, slammed his rifle but into the hunter's skull, then finished the job with a close-range shot. The jammer flickered out. Systems rebooted. The Empire regained its sight. Jack was already gone. The survivors hesitated. In the distance, an officer screamed orders into his communicator, demanding an update, a location, a confirmation of the sniper's death. No one answered. Jack grinned, vanishing once more into the ruins. Let them keep hunting. Jack Rivers had been hunted before. Pirates, mercenaries, rival soldiers. He'd seen it all. But this was new. The Empire wasn't just angry now. They were furious. The Shadow Hunters had failed. Their bodies left cooling in the ruins, and that had shattered whatever fragile illusion of control they had left. So, they sent in their best. Not stealth operatives, not scouting parties. No, this time they went all in. Jack watched from his perch as the enemy poured into the battlefield, a force unlike anything they'd deployed before. Armored exosuits stomped through the wreckage, each carrying enough firepower to level a building. Squads of elite shock troopers moved with clinical precision, scanning every shadow, weapons raised, fingers twitching over triggers. Overhead, aerial drones patrolled in careful formations, scanning for movement, heat, even breath. And leading them all, striding through the ruins like a vengeful god, was High Marshal Zyler himself. Jack had to admit, that was unexpected. He adjusted his scope, zeroing in on the alien officer. Zyler looked different up close. The usual smug arrogance was still there, but now it was tempered with something new. Frustration, maybe even fear. Jack smirked. "About time you showed up to your own party." Zyler barked orders, his voice carrying over the ruins. "Find him, now! I want that human's head." Charming. Jack's fingers tightened around his rifle. He could end this right now, one clean shot, straight through the marshal's skull. But something told him it wouldn't be that easy. The moment he fired, those drones would lock onto his position, and the full force of the Empire's elite would come crashing down on him. He needed to be smart. He exhaled, watching the enemies spread out. They were methodical, disciplined. No reckless movements this time. No easy targets. Fine. He could work with that. He shifted his aim, targeting a power junction on the side of an abandoned Imperial walker. One shot, and the thing exploded in a cascade of sparks, plunging half the battlefield into darkness. Shouts erupted. Soldiers spun toward the blast, weapons raised. Jack was already moving. He slid down a collapsed wall, weaving through the ruins like a ghost. The drones swarmed overhead, their searchlights cutting through the night. Then movement. A squad closing in, sweeping through the rubble with brutal efficiency. Jack took cover behind a broken pillar, slowing his breathing. 5 of them. He had 6 bullets left in the magazine. Plenty. He fired. The first soldier dropped before the others even registered what had happened. The second turned too slow. Jack's next shot took him clean through the visor. The third dove for cover, returning fire, his plasma bolts scorching the air where Jack had been a second earlier. Jack rolled, repositioned, fired. 3 down. The 4th and 5th moved together, flanking him, pressing the advantage. Smart, but not smart enough. Jack grabbed a shard of metal from the ground and tossed it to his left. The clang echoed through the ruins. The soldiers spun toward the sound, just long enough for Jack to put them both down. Silence. For a moment, all he could hear was his own breathing. Then, Zyler's voice, laced with rage. "Enough of this." Jack peeked over his cover, eyes narrowing. The High Marshal was stepping forward, flanked by 2 massive exosuits. He wasn't hiding behind his soldiers anymore. Brave? Maybe. Stupid? Definitely. Jack shifted his aim, lining up the shot. Zyler raised a clawed hand. A second too late, Jack heard it, the whine of something powering up behind him. His instinct screamed. He twisted, rolling just as a pulse round obliterated the spot where he'd been crouching. Damn it, they had flanked him. He hit the ground hard, scrambling for cover as more rounds peppered the ruins around him. Dust and debris filled the air. He tucked himself behind a fallen column, quickly checking his ammo. 2 shots left. Zyler's laughter echoed. "You fought well, human, but you're outmatched." Jack took a slow breath. "Yeah," he muttered. "I get that a lot." The exosuits were moving now, closing in, heavy footfalls shaking the ground. The soldiers were circling, cutting off escape routes. Time to improvise. Jack pulled a smoke grenade from his vest, yanked the pin, and tossed it toward the approaching troops. The battlefield vanished into a thick, choking haze. He moved fast, weaving through the smoke, staying low. The Empire relied too much on tech, scanners, drones, visors. But tech could be fooled. The first exosuit stomped forward, its targeting systems recalibrating. Jack darted past it, planting a detonation charge on its leg as he went. Beep! Boom! The explosion rocked the ruins. The exosuit toppled, crashing into a heap of metal and fire. Xyler staggered back, snarling. Kill him. Now! Jack reloaded. One shot left. The smoke cleared just enough for him to see the High Marshal, standing in the open, eyes blazing with fury. Jack smiled. He pulled the trigger. The round hit Xyler square in the chest. The Marshal stumbled, shock flashing across his face. For a moment, Jack thought he'd won. Then Xyler straightened his armor, reinforced, damn it, crackling but holding. Jack frowned. Well, that's unfortunate. Xyler grinned, raising his weapon. Checkmate? Jack sighed. I hate when they say that. Then he dropped a second detonation charge at his feet and bolted. The explosion roared behind him as he vanished into the ruins. The hunt wasn't over yet. The Empire was quiet. Too quiet. Jack Rivers had been expecting another wave of soldiers, another desperate attempt to flush him out, another barrage of orders screamed through the comms. Instead, the ruins were still. No patrols, no drones, no heavy boots stomping through the rubble. Just the distant crackle of fires left burning and the eerie silence of an army that no longer knew what to do. Jack adjusted his position, peering through the scope of his rifle. Down below, where the battle had raged just hours ago, the Empire's forces were in retreat. Not a tactical withdrawal. Not a regrouping maneuver. A retreat. Jack smirked. Well, I'll be damned. He watched as officers shouted at their troops, some trying to maintain order, others just scrambling to get the hell out. The exosuits that hadn't been destroyed were loading onto transport carriers, their towering frames now hunched defeated. The once imposing shock troopers moved with cautious, jittery energy, their weapons still drawn, but their eyes darting to every shadow, every rooftop, every pile of debris, like they expected a ghost to appear and take them out one by one. Jack wasn't even shooting anymore. And that was the funny part, really. He didn't have to. The damage was done. The message had been sent. The Empire had thrown everything they had at him. Drones, elite soldiers, even their damn High Marshal. And what did they have to show for it? Dozens of dead troops, millions of credits in wrecked military equipment, and an entire battalion spooked out of its mind. All because of one human. Jack let out a low whistle, shaking his head. They're never going to live this down. A crackle in his earpiece. Lien's voice, half amused, half exasperated. You still alive, Rivers? Jack stretched, wincing slightly. More or less. You do realize you just became an urban legend, right? Jack grinned. What, already? That was fast. They're calling you the Phantom of Ruin 6. Jack snorted. That's dramatic. Oh, it gets better. Some of them think you're not even human. Word is, a few officers are refusing to deploy their squads until command can confirm the sniper's mortality. Jack burst out laughing. Lien chuckled. So congrats. You're officially scarier than their entire military doctrine. Jack sighed, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to get some sleep. Down below, the last of the transports were lifting off, carrying what remained of the Empire's once proud invasion force. Xyler was gone too, whether dead or licking his wounds in some Imperial med bay. Jack didn't know. Didn't really matter. The Empire had learned a valuable lesson today. They could mock humanity all they wanted, call them primitive, call them weak, call them whatever made them feel better. But when the dust settled, when the bodies were counted, and when the fear set in, they'd remember the sniper, and they'd think twice before laughing again.